Hello all, Rick here with a video looking into some of the fictional games of Star Trek. I've already done a video on Dabo and one on Tongo, but many of the others just don't have enough detail behind them to be as fleshed out as these two, so I have compiled several into one video for you. The first thing that became apparent when I was making this video was that there are a lot of fictional games in Star Trek that begin with the letter K. The second was pretty much the same issue I encountered when I made my videos on Tongo and Dabo, and that is that when these games were thought up, the rules were not. After all, they serve as background details to a scene and only have a goal or objective if it is necessary. Sometimes it is rather intuitive to discern what the goal of the game is supposed to be, or even some basic premise of how to supposedly play. Sometimes, however, it's not. Such as Caddis Cult, which has me convinced that Naomi Wildman was a child genius just in figuring out how to play. And then again, Neelix. Of course, many of the games played in Star Trek are already pre-existing ones that are real, so I'm not including those in this video, eventually settling on 4 completely made up ones. I was also going to include the Diplomath game from Lower Decks, but that would literally be dissecting a joke, so I'm going to take a pass on that one. Instead, let's start with the Ktarian game that was seen in the TNG episode The Game, and was hardly cast in a good light. The device is a simple headset that beams directly into the eyes to display a 3D space of early 90s CGI animation. The device reads the player's neural impulses, and players have to simply steer a flying disc into a moving vortex. A pretty simple premise, and there are 47 levels, each level having a number of cones and discs that corresponds. When the game is first introduced, it also has the dubious effect of stimulating the pleasure sensors of the brain into doing the happy chemicals, creating a quickly addictive effect. It couples this with a softening up of the player's susceptibility to suggestion, eventually brainwashing the player into obeying outside orders. Subsequent reveals of the game suggest that this was likely a corruption of the game's interface technology for the purposes of the takeover scheme, and that the original is free of any such dubious ulterior motive. I say this because it's unlikely the Federation would allow such a dangerous device to circulate among its member worlds, let alone aboard starships, after discovering the plot, and we do see it reappear. The game is attributed to the Ktarian species, who have been encountered several times in Star Trek, but also have multiple appearances even in the canon, from forehead spines to domes and horizontal slit pupils. They are a Federation member world too, but their plan to use this on the Enterprise did have some level of military and political backing. It's a weird situation. Moving on from this headset game to a more traditional board game from another culture. The Cardassians have a board game called Kotra that actually looks really fun to play. The board is a battle axe shape with a layout of spaces on the field of play. To either side are the pits that house the inactive pieces. It is a 2-player game of strategy based on a battlefield, much like chess would be. It is noted that the game is very skewed in favour of playing offensively, as defensive play tends to lead to a player being overwhelmed instead of providing a chance to regroup. Based purely on observation, it seems that the shape of the board would funnel the pieces into opposition with one another, which probably explains why defensive play is not really an option. We can see that one of the pits is divided into 2, and from the concept art this side is referred to as the 1 pieces area, so presumably opponents' pieces that are removed from the board are placed here. There are also dice involved, and any game that involves funny dice I'm up for. Several of the pieces are of different design and have varying names based on rank, much like chess. I did find a made-up list of rules by someone with the online name Abiyomi from 2013, which I'll link to because, frankly, it's an impressive amount of detail, and reading through it presents a coherent game that sort of resembles a cross between chess and a tabletop wargame, something very in keeping with how it was portrayed in the show. Moving from one strategy game to another now, from a far more reserved species than the Cardassians, the Vulcans. The Vulcan pursuit of pure logic is a near full-time activity, and thus many of their games and traditional recreational activities also focus around attempting to hone this discipline, or mental abilities in general. Not to say that such games are dull. Logic puzzles can be quite therapeutic when solved, and the Vulcans have no shortage of such activities. The Kal-toh game is one that was devised as a test of logic, observation and patience when played solo, as well as tactics when played against an opponent. When completed, it resembles a 38-sided structure compiled of matchstick-like metal bars sat upon a base unit, which was powered and responsible for reorganising the bars based on user input. When a new game begins, the bars, called t'an, are completely mixed up and stacked in a seemingly random fashion. However, it is not as randomised as it first seems, and this is the secret of completing kal-toh. We're talking single player at the moment, but essentially there is a pattern hidden among the chaos, and you can uncover it by moving one t'an at a time. As you make sense of the emerging pattern, the kal-toh responds by assembling the structure further, bringing you closer to completing it. The goal of a single player is to finish it in as few moves as possible, I think, while multiplayer has the opponents take it in turns to assemble the puzzle without tipping their hand to the opponent that they have uncovered the pattern, because the one who places the final piece is its victor. You fail the game if you end up disrupting the pattern, obvious or not, until the puzzle loses its cohesion and collapses, scattering the t'an everywhere. It has been noted that beginners of the game often try to look for symmetry in the design and attempt to force some upon it with their placements of the t'an. This, however, rarely yields the desired result, as symmetry is generally only revealed in the final assembly of the pattern. Presumably for the sake of replayability, the base unit derives numerous starting deals of t'an and replicates them into place, so no two starting points are the same. This is one of those puzzles that, although made up, I can see and understand how it is to be approached, and because of this, believe Tuvok's assertion that it is far more complicated than chess, because it genuinely seems so. Finally, I'm going to focus on the one most seen in Star Trek Voyager, and the one enjoyed by multiple age groups, somehow. Caddis Cult is a game developed somewhere in the Alpha Quadrant, not sure where exactly, but it's old and was known since at least the mid-23rd century. The pieces of play consisted of the Caddis Cult board, which was a large translucent hexagon, and a myriad of pieces that were placed on it. The pieces were of two shapes, circles and hexagons, divided across three colours, and players took turns to add them to the board, which was marked out on a numbered grid. At the start of the game, a player picks a colour, but during gameplay all the pieces of all three colours are usable by either side. However, the win state, and even the rules to this game, are even harder to discern than that of others, it seems, because everything I can think of, based on observation, rapidly diverges into pure speculation. Like, I have no clue. It might be based on something like Othello, where the goal is to control the majority of the board, but the placement of all the pieces is inconsistent with that approach, with sometimes the pieces being placed haphazardly all over it, and sometimes placed in organised sections. So in reality, this game was not designed to have any rules or thought put into it, but I find it kind of funny that this seems to be the most ambiguous and complex game on the list, and apparently it's simple enough for kids to enjoy and pick up easily. I'm going to leave this here before I break out the red string and try to crack the code of this fictional game and try to make it make sense. So, there's 4 of the background board games enjoyed by the crews of Trek. As a kid, I'd always see them and wonder if I could really play them, and I remember being overjoyed to learn that there exists a real rule set for things like the 3D chess game. So why not these? And apparently I'm not the only one. So thanks for watching this one, and until next vid, I've been Rick. Thanks again, and goodbye. What's that? I forgot the Wadi game from DS9. Yes I did.